Muslims repeatedly give the preservation of a single unchanged Quran as a major reason they believe in Islam. However, in recent times we have discovered that this is a myth that has spread across the Muslim world. It appears to be a meme that Muslims say in order to feel special, with no evidence of it being true. There are multiple Qurans with multiple variations. Here is Mohammed Hijab admitting to this in a debate.
Because the reason why this is important,
right.
your point, that you said that preservation means perfect preservation, that there's no...
You disagree.
You said what? Can you
I said that there is no difference in letter by letter, dot by dot.
But I'm saying no one said that.
No one said that. I can't find people in this park who have said that there is...
about this park? This park is either lay people...
So you're disagreeing with Mansour?
No.
You're disagreeing with Mansour?
No, I don't know what Mansour said, so for me to disagree.
Okay, Mansour said there is no difference in the Quran
from... Sorry.
Okay, so Mansour is wrong. He's just
I'm not going to say that Mansour is wrong. You're putting words in my mouth. Be genuine with your speech.
Okay.
Chris, your first point was that you said preservation means that it's there's no change in any words.
Right. Letter by letter, dot by dot.
That's not true.
Vowel by vowel.
For example,
so are you saying that there's not because of it? No, I need clarification. What are you saying?
What I'm saying is that the understanding of preservation, yes, the understanding of hifz or preservation is not that there's no variance.
So there are variants in the Quran?
Absolutely, everyone agrees that.
Everyone agrees there are variants in the Quran?
Yes.
Do you all believe in that?
Yes.
Wow. All right. Thank you. My argument I wanted to come here today was to demonstrate that the Quran has not been perfectly preserved, and you've just agreed to that.
No, Chris.
You've just... What? That's it. We don't need any more.
You're either acting the fool or you are...
No, I only wanted to know the answer to that one question.
You're embarrassing
No. I asked you... Look, see, you're ad hominem again.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. He just did ad hominem, and he just said it doesn't matter.
It's not an ad hominem. It's an ad hominem.
See, again, he makes insults. Why are you not capable of having an argument? Instead, you insult and you belittle.
All right, Chris.
Don't belittle me.
Okay, forget it. I'm not going to belittle you.
Yeah?
Let's deal with the arguments.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Early sources. Let me give you the exact...
wait, let's go back to what I said.
I'm going back to what you said.
Perfectly preserved Quran.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is preserved. You're misunderstanding the word preserved.
Okay. What does it mean?
Shall I explain it to you?
Yes, please.
Excellent. So now, there's two views in Islam what the word preservation of the Quran means. I'm being very generic here. Obviously, there's more.
Okay.
But two major views. Yeah, let's say. There's the views of what you call the Qurra, and the Mutakallimun. So this includes people like Ibn al-Jazari, who's a major authority in Quranic manuscripts and the Quran itself. It includes people like Fakhruddin al-Razi, who's a mutakallim, and others. That's one group. They say that in order for the Quran to be preserved, every single variant, because the thing is, first and foremost, the Prophet Muhammad said in the hadith, he said, "Unzila al-Quran ala sab'ati ahruf." So the Quran has been revealed on 7 different variants. So that doesn't mean to say that every single word of the Quran is variant. It means on select words, there are more than one way of saying it. And the reason why the Prophet said that, just the background, the reason why the Prophet said that is he said that it's in order to make it easier for a Shaykh al-Fani, like elderly people and other people, for making it easier, more facilitating, for people of different tribes, for people of different backgrounds and so on.
Okay.
In the 8th century, Muslim scholars were talking about dozens of variant readings of the Quran, including differences in the consonantal text. A couple of centuries later, Muslim scholars decided to contain the variant Qurans once and for all. In the 10th century, great divisions over the Quranic text led Ibn Mujahid, among others, to sponsor a regulatory concept whereby they would limit the number of variant readings of the Quran to a number that would later be considered canonical, more or less. Ibn Mujahid argued that there were 7 equally valid readings. Others argued for 10 or 14. The gradual, yet never complete, acceptance of the argument for 7 readings was generally accompanied with the caveat that each reading has 2 versions. Effectively, then, 14 different versions were considered equally authentic, only one of which was Hafs an-Nazm. And that's the reading that the standardized Quran is based on, even though there are different readings attributed to Hafs an-Nazm as well, with variants between them. But speaking of the standardized Quran, in the 20th century, variants in the Quran continued to be a problem. And in response to these variants, the Egyptian government destroyed a large number of Qurans by sinking them in the Nile. and issued its own text. And that's the standardized version that many Muslims have been taught to think of when they hear perfectly preserved Quran. And if you think this was the first time Muslim authorities destroyed variant Qurans, you don't know Islamic history. It's been going on from the beginning. But what do Muslim apologists say today? They just can't stop themselves.
Right.
There are some scholars who say that all of the variants must be preserved. Okay, and they say therefore the 10 major qira'ahs that we have today, that they must be, all of the variants that the Prophet said must be within those 10. Whereas the early view, which I take, is that actually that's not the case. That in order for preservation to happen, all you only require is one variant.
Right, but what you're talking about here, and I think you summed it up quite well there, is that preservation, not a perfect preservation, because ultimately if it was perfect in the way that we understand it from a scholarly point of view, there would only be one copy.
I'll tell you something, Chris, which I think you're right about. Yeah.
Okay.
When you do listen to on prima facie value, when you listen to this kind of, when people say that the Quran word for word, letter for letter, it makes it seem as if there's no variance.
Right.
I agree with that, and I think that's a mistake on our behalf. That we didn't clarify that early in the da'wah.
Cool, yeah.
It's where people in the past, 20, 30 years ago, didn't explain to the people, because this is known to Islamic historians for 1,400 years. You know, textual criticism, for example, some say that, well, Islam doesn't have textual criticism, but the truth is, it's called naqd al-qira'at, or textual criticism of the qira'at. That was there in the early days of Islam.
There were still arguments among the early companions who knew Muhammad themselves, who were great reciters of the Quran, and yet they had different understandings about what was Quran and what was not Quran. Then Uthman came along and standardized that Quran in your Sahih Hadith.
So there's a degree of truth in what you're saying.
Okay.
The thing is, that here's the thing.
I appreciate honesty.
Yeah, there's a degree of truth. There was still, so some Sahaba, some companions, like as I said, Abu Darda, Ibn Mas'ud, Ibn Abbas, they would recite how they heard the Quran, which might have been different to the way somebody else heard it. But as I said before, they are saying they heard it that way because it's on this harf, on this word.
Right. But then you have to explain to me, why were they arguing about something if the Prophet made it clear which is acceptable and which isn't?
Okay, here's the thing. If it was seen as that they are saying something that's other than the Quran, it would have been deemed as kufr, as disbelief in heresy, which it never was. So there was this is why I say there was a degree of truth. There was an atmosphere of acceptability.
Muhammad's hijab's view on the preservation of the Quran is not the same view that many Muslims have today and many Muslims have at this park. His view is different. His view is actually, so as long as you have one part of it that has been preserved, it doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have all of it. Now that is not perfect preservation. That is not perfect preservation according to scholars, and he couldn't name me any who thought that way. The only people who will think like that are people who are desperate to keep that argument up that the Quran has been perfectly preserved. The Quran has not been perfectly preserved. Muhammad has, in a very light way, admitted that. He holds to a different view than a lot of Muslims have today. And to be fair, I'm grateful that he's admitted that. I think that's fair of him, and I want to congratulate him for doing that. That's fair.
And if you think the differences in these qira'at or recitations do not alter the meaning, think again.
We have that comes to my mind is chapter 37 verse 12. Now I got my Arabic speakers here so they can break this down. Now DLC, do you mind reading this? If you could see this, can you read this for me in the Hafs version?
Yep, the Hafs version says bal ajibta wa yaskharun. So the word that is in question is ajibta, which means you are amazed or surprised.
You are amazed. Now who's the speaker, Jai, in this context? In chapter 37 verse 12, who's the one speaking?
This is Allah speaking to Muhammad.
So Allah speaking to Muhammad, and he says, you were surprised while they mocked, or you were amazed while they mocked. So Allah speaking to Muhammad. But when we scroll down here and we see all these different, readings of the Quran here, they're mostly the same. But we get down to Al-Kasai and Al-Hamza. We get here, what does it say here, DLC?
It says, bal ajibtu wa yaskharun.
Now tell us what the difference is.
What's happening here is Allah speaking again, but he changes the pronoun. He says, bal ajibtu wa yaskharun. Ajibtu, that's the word difference. If you remember in the Hafs, it was ajibta. Now what's the difference here? It says, I was amazed.
Wow. So Allah is amazed now. Before it was Muhammad who was amazed.
So here's the big difference. We got Allah, who is the speaker. He's the speaker in both versions of the Quran. He's the speaker. And yet we have Allah saying in one version, he says, you were surprised while they mocked. While in the other one here, he says, I was surprised while they mocked. So the Muslims can't say, oh, well, this dialects and, they all carry the same meaning. No, the meaning literally, it changes the entire context. Was it Muhammad who was surprised, or was it Allah who was surprised? Now, if you want to say both, then, by all means, Allahu Alam, say both. Both Allah and Muhammad were surprised, but you can't say that this isn't a difference. And that doesn't change the meaning. Number 2, we got Surah 10, verse 16. Now, Jai, go ahead and talk to us about this. What's this one about?
Okay, here is one that is a contradiction. A lot of times, Muslims will ask you, okay, show me where they contradict. All right, here's where they contradict. Chapter 10, verse 16 says, say, if Allah wills, I would not have recited it to you, nor would he have made it known to you. Nor would he have made it known to you. Now, if we look into the Arabic here.
Okay, so that's the Hafs. That's where we want you to look. He would not have made it known to you. وَلَا أَدْرَاكُمْ. That's where the elongated sound, it means no, not known to you. He would not have made it known to you. That's what most Muslims know about.
And then we go to one of Ibn Kathir's readers, Qunbal, and he says,
وَلَا أَدْرَاكُمْ بِهِ. No elongated a anything. It's very short, which means he would have made it known to you.
Oh, wow. Those are two contradictions. One says he would not have made it known to you. The other one says he would have made it known to you. There's no way out of this one. This is a clear contradiction.
That's clear cut.
But don't take our word for it. They talk about it in the Muslim sources, like in Tafsir Jalalain here, which is available online to everyone. It does admit this variant reading, as you see here in the highlighted versions. One says, nor would he have made it known, and the other says he would have made it known.
Wow. Yeah, there's no way out of this. So even their scholars are seeing and admitting that this is a contradiction. So you can go on altafsir.com, pull up Jalalain's Tafsir, and you can see it for yourself and show the Muslims that even their scholars are acknowledging that this Surah 10, verse 16, has a variant reading that contradicts.
This one is a legal variant. What do I mean by that? I mean that depending on which version of the Quran you're reading, changes and affects how you practice the religion of Islam.
So the verse here is about how you redeem a missed fast. So when Muslims miss fasts in Ramadan, they have to make them up. In Surah 2, verse 184, it says, Fidyatun ta'amu miskin. Fidya means the redemption. Ta'am means the feeding of. Miskin is the word here that you need, which we've written here, transliterated here. One poor person, singular, miskin, one poor person. That's Hafs. So for every missed fast, you have to feed one poor person. However, in the other version, famous version actually called Warsh, it says, Fidyatun ta'ami masakin. Masakin is the word here. So here the redemption is by feeding plural people. And in the Arabic here, the plural is more than 2. 3 or more. Okay, so if you're living in a part of the world that reads the Hafs Quran, if you miss a fast, you have to feed one person per missed fast. If you're in a part of the world that reads the Warsh Quran, for every missed fast, you have to feed 3 or more poor people. So what are you going to do?
That's tough. Allahu Alam. I probably have to say on that one, Allah knows best. That's tough. So for every fast day that I miss, depending on the Quran that I'm reading, depending on the Quran that I take authoritative, it determines how I make up that fast day. Now, the reason why this is so bad is because if I do this wrong, then I'm not purified before Allah. Is that right?
Correct. These fasts are obligation. They're obligatory. They're not voluntary. Which means that's why they don't go away if you miss them. Even if you're ill, you can't fast that day. You have to make it up. So the rules of Allah, what did Allah have in his mind? Was he particularly generous that day and said, just feed one person per missed fast? Or was he really strict about it and said, actually, it needs to be 3 or more per fast?
Wow.
It couldn't have been both. Which one was in the mind of Allah when he revealed that verse?
Wow. And I see that you got Al-Tabari there. What's Al-Tabari talking about?
So Al-Tabari here acknowledges that there's the singular reading, and then he also acknowledges that there are others who read it in the plural, poor people. So miskin, a poor person, masakin, poor people. So that's acknowledged by Muslim commentators as well. and by Muslim jurists.
Wow. So not only do we have variants that change the meaning, variants that contradict, but we also have variants that change the ruling, how you are to practice Islam and even purify yourselves, make yourself right, reconcile yourself back with Allah. If you miss a fast day, do you just feed a poor person and you're good to go? Or do you have to feed multiple poor people and then you're good to go? Now, with this variant, guys, it's a good response to when Muslims say that, the variant readings just have to do with dialect and just how, certain Muslims and certain people around the world pronounce certain words and enunciate certain words. And, they have a different way of speaking, but it's the same word. It's the same script, right? It has the same skeleton and everything like that. Now, but with this variant, this doesn't work if words are actually missing, right? Jai and DLC?
Exactly. How does that work? One Quran has a word the other Quran doesn't have, or the other Quran has a word the other one doesn't have? I thought they were all the same.
They're supposed to all be the same, man. Just sound different.
That's what they say.
It tells me a scribe was sleepy.
Sleepy scribe.
Sleepy scribe.
So this is it, chapter 57, verse 24.
It says, those who are stingy and enjoin upon people stinginess, and whoever turns away, then indeed Allah is the free of need, the praiseworthy. So the bit that we want to focus on is the Allah free of need and praiseworthy, which in the Arabic it says, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ هُوَ الْغَنِيُّ الْحَمِيدُ. And the huwa part is the problem.
Because we see it in some versions of the Quran, like Hafs, but it seems to disappear in other versions of the Quran, like Warsh.
So huwa means he is. So in this version, Warsh, there's no he is, which messes up the grammar. There's no is. So what are we going to do about this one? So what happened here?
Now, this is interesting, just really quick, guys. So you can't pronounce a word that is not there, right?
Right.
You can't have a specific dialect on a word that doesn't exist in the text.
Exactly.
Wow. This is awesome. This is beautiful.
Yeah, so it's not just an accent, or it's not just a dialect. No, this is a completely missing word. Or if you take Warsh as the standard version of the Quran, you could say that Hafs and other versions added a word.
Depends on which Quran is your Quran, man.
Right.
Oh, that's good.
So who chooses which version of the Quran is the main one? Allah? Muhammad? It seems the reasoning behind this is just as man-made as the Quran itself.
So, here's like a list of them here. We're only going to be focusing on one reading, which is the Hafs reading, which he gets it from a guy called Asim. This is Yasser Qadhi's book. He says like 95% of the Muslim world reads from Hafs.
When you say most popular Quran, you're talking about the Hafs. Yep. And basically, if you were to go around to various places, if you were to add up everyone, you'd find that about 95% of Muslims are using the Hafs today. And as I understand it, it's because that was the version of that the Ottoman Empire favored. And so that one sort of drowned out over time. It drowned out other versions. But then for the 1924 Cairo edition, with the birthday of the Quran that people are mostly familiar with, they used the Hafs. And so this is what's distributed around the world. In other words, it's not something about this was just somehow recognized as the most reliable version. It's just the empire that took over in Islam. This was their local version. And so they spread it throughout their empire. And then when in the early 20th century, Muslims were saying, hey, we need a standardized version to send around the world. This is the one that had become most popular because of the Ottoman Empire. And that's the reason. It had nothing to do with like internal reliability or examining manuscripts or something like that. This is the most popular, and this is the one we're going with.
This is the most popular Quran. This is Hafs right here. And so, like I said, if you go to any Arabic version of the Quran, you open up in the first couple pages, you're going to see the chain of transmission. And so this is what it says here. So this is the Quran. It goes from Hafs, it goes to Asim, Abi Abdurrahman, it goes to Uthman, to Ali, to Zayd, Ubay, to Muhammad. And so that's the chain of narration. That's a chain of transmission for Hafs. So the question is now, are the narrators in this chain considered reliable? So now let's apply those scholars scholars of hadith criticism when it comes to the transmitters of are they reliable or are they not, based on the standards that we saw. What happens when we apply that to this Quran here?
Muslim scholars eventually would assess the reliability of a hadith, and in order to get away just judging it based on its content, which would be subjective to some extent, you may not like what it's saying, and so you may think it's unreliable just because you don't like it, that they came up with a more objective method, which is just based on the transmission, the list of names. I got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, all the way back to a companion of Muhammad who heard it from Muhammad, and that you look at this list of names and you assess the hadith, you assess the reliability of the hadith on the reliability of all the people on this list of names. So all the people who are transmitting this, are they reliable? If all these guys are reliable transmitters, then you can trust the hadith. And what you're doing now is you're saying that Qurans are the same. If you get a Quran and you know what it's saying in the Arabic, it's telling you this Quran came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, all the way back to Muhammad. And you're saying we can take the exact same criteria for examining the reliability, the trustworthiness of the people who are transmitting it that's used in the hadith methodology and apply it right here to whether we are getting a reliable transmission of the Quran.
Exactly. So let's start with the first one on the list. Hafs. Is he considered reliable according to the scholarship that, that David just summarized and laid out?
Of course he is. 95% of Muslims use that Quran. It's got to be the best of the best. But go ahead.
It's got to be. Imam Muslim, the one who compiled Sahih Muslim, what did he say? He said that Hafs is rejected in hadith. Okay. Al-Bukhari, I'm starting from the bottom going up. Al-Bukhari said they abandoned him. So he's abandoned in hadith. Okay.
Just to be clear, these are hadith scholars commenting on the reliability of this guy named Hafs. They're talking about him, how reliable a transmitter of narrations he is.
His hadith is weak. I intentionally abandoned him. Others said, Ibn Ma'in said he's not reliable. The Hafs reading is more correct than Shu'bah. Shu'bah is the other reading of Asim, but Shu'bah is more reliable than Hafs. So he's saying, hey, look, so Asim, these two students that he had, Hafs and Shu'bah, yes, Hafs is a better, more correct than him in terms of the reading, but Shu'bah is more reliable, more trustworthy. Ahmad bin Hanbal said that he's rejected in hadith. So it gets even worse. So let's go to the next slide here. So we talked about Al-Bukhari and Muslim. Now let's go to An-Nisa'i. I said he is not reliable and his hadith should not be written down. And he said in another place, he's rejected in hadith. As-Saji, this one is very, very interesting here. It says, he narrated from someone who's rejected and in others, and he says he fabricated hadith. So that's a huge charge to say that Hafs fabricated hadith.
Yeah, that's different from saying, like, I can say you have a weak memory, but if I say you fabricated stuff, that's you're inventing stuff.
And what did Muhammad say about someone who invents stuff?
Yeah, you're going to hell.
Yeah, exactly.
One way ticket to hell.
Exactly. So another one, he's weak in hadith. Now here we have another interesting part here where it says that Ibn Khirash says he is a liar. He's rejected. Why? Because fabricating hadith. He fabricates hadith. So he's a liar. He's actually called a liar.
Guys, understand this. So what you were told just a few years ago by Muslim scholars and Dawah guys, there's only one Quran perfectly preserved. Any two Qurans you could ever find anywhere in the history of Islam line up perfectly, dot for dot, letter for letter. That's what we were all told. It was all complete nonsense. It was all complete lies. You look at the actual history of Islam, entire chapters came up missing because Muslims were too lazy to recite them. Large passages came up missing because the only people who had those passages memorized died in battle. Verses are eaten by a sheep or a goat, depending on your source. Over 200 verses were lost just from Surah 33 alone. And then you ended up with all these differences in the way people were reciting the Quran. Uthman, it becomes such a problem that Uthman, the third of the rightly guided caliphs, orders everyone to hand over whatever copies they have of the Quran, burns them all, puts out a standardized version, and before not too long, you end up with dozens of versions of the Quran, dozens of different versions of the Quran. Some guy comes along and says, I'm imposing these 7. I'm saying these are the 7 good ones. We're rejecting all the rest. Someone comes along after him and says, no, we need to add a few more. These guys are all making decisions about what is and is not considered the Quran. Like, what authority do these guys have to make those kinds of decisions? So this is going on all along. And so you have different versions of the Quran And those versions, those different versions of the Quran come through different chains of transmitters. So how did you get this version of the Quran? Well, this version of the Quran came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, all the way back to Muhammad. This version of the Quran, it came from so-and-so, who got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so, got it from so-and-so. You ended up with a situation where one particular version of the Quran, not because it was especially reliable, not because they went to manuscripts, but just because that's the one the Ottoman Empire spread when it controlled the Muslim world, that one became most popular. But here we have Jai and Daughter of Christ, and they're going through what Muslim scholars in the area of the reliability of transmissions are saying about the guy who transmitted the most popular version of the Quran in the world. 95% of Muslims use this Quran, and they're just applying the methodology from hadith studies, who's reliable and who's not, and they're pointing out that the guy who's responsible for the Quran that is used by 95% of Muslims in the world is transmitted by a guy who was a known fabricator and liar. What's that mean? If this guy were transmitting a hadith, they would not trust him. But he's the one who gives 95% of Muslims their Quran. They wouldn't trust this guy with a story about Muhammad. They wouldn't trust him. But you trust him with the Quran?
Yeah, actually, there's something else as well. He's also a thief. Yahya bin Sa'id said from Shu'bah. Now, Shu'bah was the other student of Asim. He's the other canonical reader. He said, Hafs bin Sulayman took a book from me and did not return it. And he used to take people's books to copy them.
So we can say that the Quran that is most widely used among Muslims in the world today was transmitted to them by a known liar, fabricator, and thief.